Imagine waking in a godforsaken forest, your flesh etched with unholy geometries, lines of fire that whisper of sins not your own. Margaret Hayes, innocent as Eve, emerged from the wilderness, her body a canvas for the devil's arithmetic. But what divine retribution carved her cell? What forbidden knowledge drove her captor to play God, and 3 healers to flee like Judas? In the shadowed heart of 1823 Ohio, where the untamed wilderness clawed at the edges of fragile settlements, a young woman's soul became the battleground for humanity's darkest ambitions. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves that autumn, as if the land itself mourned the atrocities hidden beneath its canopy. Margaret Hayes, a mere 22 years old, stumbled from the depths of those ancient woods, naked, scarred, and forever altered. Her skin bore marks not of random violence, but of calculated precision. Intersecting lines, perfect angles, circles within squares that evoked the sacred geometries of old alchemists or the forbidden diagrams of occult grimoires. These were no mere wounds. They were symbols, perhaps invocations of divine order twisted into profane experiments. Hunters who found her spoke in hushed tones of her fragmented mutterings, words about sessions in a chair bound by leather straps, where pain met measurement in a ritual of unholy inquiry. 3 physicians, pillars of their communities, gazed upon her and recoiled. Dr. Edmund Cartwright, the first to examine her, burned his notes in a fit of terror, fleeing Ohio as if pursued by the ghosts of his own conscience. The records were sealed by a trembling magistrate, buried in dusty archives like forbidden scriptures, only to resurface after generations, whispering of sins that echoed through time. This is the tale of Margaret Hayes, a story that peels back the veil on early American medicine's underbelly, a realm where scientific curiosity danced with demonic hubris, and the pursuit of knowledge exacted a toll on the human spirit. It's a narrative laced with biblical undertones, the hubris of Babel, the markings of Cain, the redemption sought in vain. What forces, mortal or ethereal, carve her flesh? And why did her ordeal feel like a harbinger of divine justice, a warning etched in skin against tampering with God's creation? But before we descend into the abyss of Margaret's torment, pause with me. If tales like this stir your soul, ignite that primal curiosity about the shadows history tries to erase, then subscribe now. Hit that button if you're ready to confront the uncomfortable truths, the fragments of real events that powerful hands once smothered in silence. And in the comments below, share the state you're watching from. Are you in the heartland, where these woods still whisper? Or across oceans, drawn to America's haunted past? Let's forge a brotherhood of seekers, unafraid of the dark. Our journey begins in the sweltering summer of 1823, amid the rugged frontier of southeastern Ohio. This was no idyllic paradise. It was a land forged in sweat and survival, where the Ohio River snaked like a serpent through valleys and dense forests stood as sentinels against progress. The air buzzed with the hum of insects, thick with the aroma of wild honeysuckle and the metallic tang of freshly turned soil. Settlements clung to clearings like fragile outposts, their log cabins hewn from the very trees that threatened to reclaim them. Here, faith was a lifeline, Methodist hymns echoing from makeshift churches, Bibles worn from nightly readings, invoking protection against the wilderness's perils. But beneath this veneer of piety lurked ambitions unchecked, where men played at godhood in hidden corners. Margaret Hayes resided in a humble homestead near what would later become Athens County, in a speck of a community dubbed Millfield, a cluster of about 40 souls, hardy folk transplanted from Pennsylvania and Virginia, chasing dreams of fertile land and unburdened lives. Her father, Thomas Hayes, a widower etched by grief and labor, had built their cabin with his own calloused hands, rough-hewn logs chinked with mud, a stone hearth that crackled with pine-scented fires, windows shuttered against nocturnal threats. The farm sprawled modestly, fields of golden corn swaying like congregations in prayer, patches of wheat rippling under azure skies, vegetable gardens bursting with the earth's bounty. Yet isolation defined their existence. The nearest neighbors, the Brennans, Irish immigrants with ruddy cheeks and lilting accents, lived a mile distant, their voices carrying faintly on the wind like distant echoes of another world. Margaret herself was a beacon in this rustic tableau, her intelligence a spark that illuminated the mundane. At 22, she possessed a fluency in reading and writing that set her apart, a gift from her father, once a schoolmaster before the soil claimed him. She devoured borrowed medical tomes under flickering lantern light, her journals filled with observations that blended poetry and precision, notes on crop rotations infused with metaphors of growth and decay, reflections on human frailty drawn from scriptural parables. Her letters to kin back east brimmed with wit, sharp as a scythe, questioning the world's mechanics with a curiosity that bordered on the divine. Why does the body heal as the soul aches? She'd ponder, her quills scratching against parchment like confession. In an era where women were tethered to hearth and field, Margaret embodied a quiet rebellion, a mind unchained, seeking truths in the stars above the canopy or the veins beneath her skin. The Hayes cabin exuded a lived-in warmth, the scent of stew simmering over coals, the creak of wooden floors under bare feet, sunlight filtering through muslin curtains to dance on quilted beds. Thomas, his back bowed from years of toil, relied on her increasingly that fateful summer. An injury during spring planting, a sharp twist that sent pain lancing like divine retribution, left him hobbled, forcing Margaret to shoulder the burdens. She rose before dawn, her hands blistered from hoe and plow, her brow furrowed under the relentless sun. Neighbors whispered of her resilience, but Mary Brennan, her closest confidant, noticed the subtle shifts. Margaret's visits dwindled by late June, her laughter fading like evening light. She seemed haunted, Mary would later recount, her Irish brogue thick with sorrow, as if shadows clung to her skirts, whispering secrets she dared not share. The disappearance struck like a thunderclap on July 15th, 1823. Thomas awoke to an unnatural silence, the hearth cold, the cabin's air heavy with absence. Margaret's bed lay empty, sheets rumpled as if she'd risen in haste. Her journals vanished like stolen relics. No shattered glass, no splintered door, no farewell etched in haste. It was as if the earth had swallowed her whole, or perhaps something more sinister, an abduction veiled in mystery, a voluntary flight into the unknown. Thomas, his heart fracturing like dry clay, rallied the settlement. Men with lanterns and hounds combed the woods, their calls echoing through the twilight. Margaret, Margaret Hayes. But the forest guarded its secrets jealously, a labyrinth of towering oaks whose leaves rustled like judgmental whispers, maples shedding bark like flayed skin, hickories standing sentinel with gnarled limbs outstretched in accusation. This wilderness was no mere backdrop. It pulsed with life and peril. Wolves' howls pierced the night like cries of the damned. Bears lumbered through underbrush with primal grace. Ravines yawned like open graves waiting to claim the lost. Streams murmured secrets, their waters cold and unforgiving, reflecting fractured moonlight. Weeks blurred into a haze of despair. Whispers in Millfield's tavern grew darker. Eaten by beasts, some muttered, crossing themselves. Taken by savages, others feared, though native shadows had long retreated. A few dared suggest elopement, a secret suitor luring her away, but those who knew her soul dismissed it. Margaret's heart beat for knowledge, not romance. Her contentment in Millfield was rooted deep like the ancient trees. As autumn cloaked the land in crimson and gold, hope withered like fallen leaves. Then, on October 23rd, under a sky bruised with gray clouds, fate intervened. A chill mist clung to the ground, muffling footsteps and blurring visions, as if the veil between worlds thinned. James Fletcher, a grizzled veteran of the War of 1812, and his son Robert, barely out of boyhood, tracked deer through the woods 8 miles northeast of Millfield. The air carried the crisp bite of frost, leaves crunching under boots like brittle bones. A sound pierced the hush, a low moan, rhythmic and unearthly, rising from the forest depths. At first, they mistook it for a wounded animal, but as they crept closer, it morphed. Human words fragmented and mechanical, laced with an otherworldly cadence. The sessions must persist, the voice intoned, punctuated by silences heavy as judgment. The chair, leather bindings, observations incomplete. Bursts of pleading followed, desperate yet detached, like echoes from a confessional booth in hell. James, his war-hardened nerves tested, felt a chill deeper than the autumn air. In 3 decades amid these woods, nothing had unnerved him so. They pressed on, hearts pounding in sync with the eerie litany, until a small clearing emerged near Miller's Creek, a silvery ribbon of water gurgling like suppressed sobs. There she sat, cross-legged on the damp earth. Margaret Hayes, stripped bare, her form vulnerable against the encroaching shadows. Her dark hair cascaded in tangled mats, framing a face pale as moonlight, eyes staring into voids unseen. She rocked gently, arms encircling knees, her voice a monotonous chant. The subject requires further stimulus, copper instruments, precise heat. Silences stretched, then variations erupted. Measurements demand exactitude. Promising reactions noted. James later confessed to Dr. Hartwell, his voice trembling like autumn leaves, that the sight seared his soul. Not merely her nudity, a violation of modesty's sacred veil, nor her apparent descent into madness. It was the scars, intricate geometries, marauding her skin, lines intersecting at perfect angles, circles inscribed with mathematical rigor, triangles pointing like accusatory fingers. They mapped her body like a blasphemous atlas, evoking ancient symbols of creation and destruction, perhaps the very patterns God used to weave the universe, now perverted on human flesh. Were these marks of scientific sacrilege or signs of spiritual warfare? Guilt inscribed, sin made manifest? Robert, young and impulsive, stepped forward, but Margaret's head jerked up with serpentine speed. Her eyes, once vibrant with intellect, now glazed like a prophet's in trance, fixed on horizons beyond mortal sight. Her words accelerated, pitch climbing, doctor demands compliance, protocol unbroken, subject still for procedure, instrument calibrated. The hunters, moved by pity laced with fear, draped her in James's woolen jacket, rough fabric against scarred skin, and bore her back to Millfield, her mutterings trailing like a curse. Dr. Samuel Hartwell, the settlement's sole healer, was summoned forthwith. A man of 50, trained in Philadelphia's hallowed halls, he embodied methodical wisdom. Spectacles perched on a hooked nose, hands steady from years of sutures and salves. His clinic, a modest annex to his cabin, smelled of herbs and laudanum, dried lavender hanging from rafters, shelves lined with glass vials glinting like captured stars. Hartwell had tended Margaret before, a fractured wrist at 16, mended with splints and prayers, a fever that raged like infernal fire, quelled by willow bark and faith. He knew her as resilient, her spirit unyielding as the frontier itself. But this examination shattered his composure. Under candlelight's flickering glow, shadows dancing like restless spirits, he unveiled the horror. The scars were no haphazard savagery. They were surgical masterpieces, incisions uniform in depth, perhaps an 1/8 inch, aligning with anatomical precision. Lines radiated from joints like spokes of a wheel, mapping muscles and nerves in a grid that screamed of forbidden knowledge. 17 distinct patterns he counted, each layered over time, healed with antiseptic care, suggesting a perpetrator versed in medicine's arts, yet devoid of its mercy. The visuals assaulted him. Pale skin marbled with raised ridges, pink and silver under lamplight, forming equilateral triangles over her abdomen. Symbols of Trinity profaned, concentric circles around her shoulders, echoing Dante's infernal rings. The air grew thick, Hartwell's breath shallow, as if the room itself recoiled. But Margaret's demeanor pierced deeper. She perched motionless, statue-like, eyes voids of emotion, then erupted in clinical recitations. Subject's response to electrical impulse. Day 47. Copper probes along spine. Heightened lumbar sensitivity. Experiment proceeds. Her voice, flat as a gravestone, referred to herself as the subject, detailing torments with detached precision, a litany of pain masquerading as progress. Hartwell probed gently. Laudanum dripped on her tongue for calm. Questions whispered like confessions. What befell you, child? But inquiries into her absence triggered floods. Observations require continuation, stimulus calibrated. Most chilling, she addressed him as doctor, assuming poses, arms outstretched like crucifixion, head tilted in supplication, awaiting resumption of the rite. When he hesitated, agitation bloomed, repetitions of protocol and necessity, her body trembling as if divine wrath stirred within. 3 days he labored, his journal filling with sketches, geometric horrors rendered in ink, biblical references scrawled in margins. As the mark upon Cain, so these upon her. Protection or curse? Hypnosis attempts, gleaned from Eastern texts, failed, her barriers impenetrable as Eden's gates. Exhaustion etched his face, mirroring Thomas's grief-stricken vigil outside. Hartwell's conclusion dawned like a malediction. This was no natural malady, but engineered torment, a fusion of science and sin, where ambition eclipsed ethics, inviting spiritual retribution. The implications gnawed at his soul. Who wielded the blade? A rogue physician, chasing enlightenment through agony? Or something spectral, a manifestation of collective guilt? The frontier's sins inscribed on innocent flesh? Margaret's case evoked Job's trials. Undeserved suffering testing faith, her scars a map to redemption or damnation. As Hartwell sealed his notes, a chill wind rattled the shutters, as if the wilderness approved or warned. Yet this was merely the prelude. The true abyss awaited, as 2 more doctors confronted the enigma, each recoiling from truths that blurred medicine and metaphysics. Margaret's body, a living testament to hubris, begged questions of divine justice. Was her ordeal punishment for societal sins, or a call to atonement? The forest outside seemed to listen, its shadows lengthening like fingers of fate. Beneath the veneer of frontier progress in 1823 Ohio, where lanterns pierced the night like feeble prayers against encroaching darkness, Margaret Hayes's ordeal unveiled the abyss of human depravity. Her body, once a temple of youthful vitality, now bore the stigmata of systematic torment. Incisions not born of accident or malice alone, but of a calculated quest that blurred the line between healer and heretic. The geometric scars, precise as Masonic symbols or the forbidden runes of alchemists, spoke of a perpetrator schooled in anatomy's secrets, wielding pain as a tool for enlightenment. Her mutterings, mechanical echoes of procedures and stimuli, hinted at a fractured psyche, where consent twisted into complicity under the weight of deception. Why had she endured? What serpent's whisper convinced her that agony served a higher purpose? These questions gnawed at Dr. Samuel Hartwell like thorns in a crown, forcing him to plumb depths that challenged his faith in medicine and in mankind's soul. The air in Hartwell's clinic grew stifling, thick with the metallic scent of blood and the herbal tang of poultices, as he pieced together the fragments of Margaret's nightmare. Candles sputtered in iron holders, casting elongated shadows that danced like accusing spirits across plank walls. Margaret sat listless, her eyes, once alight with curiosity, now hollow vessels, reflecting inner voids. When she spoke, it was in bursts, subject complies, current applied, observations noted. Each phrase landed like a hammer on anvil, forging dread in Hartwell's chest. This was no mere madness. It was engineered, a soul warped by rituals disguised as research. Biblical echoes haunted him. the hubris of Icarus, flying too near the sun. Or worse, the temptation in Eden, where knowledge came at the cost of innocence. Was Margaret's captor a modern Prometheus, stealing fire from the gods, or a fallen angel, perverting creation's order? Hartwell's probe began with the relics of her vanishing, possessions strewn through the woods like breadcrumbs in a grim fairy tale. Hunters had gathered them, a tattered shawl snagged on briars, shoes caked in mud from forgotten paths, and most crucially, her journal, wedged between mossy logs 50 yards from her discovery site. The leather cover, bloated from rain and etched with mildew like veins of corruption, yielded pages that whispered of dissent. Early entries evoked the rhythm of rural life. Precise notations on corn yields under July suns that baked the earth like a kiln, weather sketches predicting storms with the accuracy of Old Testament prophets, letters to Pennsylvania kin laced with humor sharp as a reaper's blade. The fields bloom as if in praise, she'd written, her script flowing elegant as a river's bend. But by late June, the harmony fractured. Handwriting jittered, loops tightening like nooses, words slashed and reborn in frantic revisions. Content veered into obsession, medical arcana dominating, as if a fever gripped her mind. June 28th. Galvani's frogs twitch at electricity's touch, nerves dancing like souls in purgatory. If it revives the dead, might it mend the living's hidden fractures? Philadelphia's trials promise miracles, currents flowing through flesh, awakening what slumbers. Hartwell paused here, his finger tracing the ink, feeling the paper's texture rough as sackcloth. The shift was palpable, a soul lured by the siren call of progress. July 1st deepened the shadow, an invitation to witness true inquiry, procedures beyond Millfield's grasp. My learning deems me worthy, they say. Father must remain ignorant. His world is soil and scripture, not the scalpel's edge. These sessions hold eternity's keys. The final entry, July 12th, sealed the pact. Examinations deem me perfect vessel. Pain fleeting, discovery immortal. I assent, eyes open to the divine in science. Consent freely given, or coerced by flattery, preying on her intellect, like Lucifer tempting Eve with the apple's wisdom? Hartwell's stomach churned. This was no victim snatched unwillingly, but one seduced into the maw, her curiosity the fatal flaw. Clues multiplied from her garments, retrieved in tatters from thorn-choked thickets. In the hem of her dress, faded calico patterned with flowers now symbolic of wilted innocence. Hartwell found a sewn-in scrap. Fine vellum, scripted in elegant cursive. Secure subject via leather bonds to immobilize during voltaic application. Probes penetrate quarter-inch max, safeguarding neural integrity. Sessions capped at half-hour, interludes for restoration. The prose chilled like winter's first frost, detached, clinical, a manual for torment masquerading as protocol. The paper itself betrayed affluence, smooth as silk, inked with pigment rich and unfading, sourced from Eastern merchants, not frontier barter. This was no rustic butcher. The hand behind it wielded wealth and erudition, resources to import glass jars for batteries, copper from distant mines. Discreet queries rippled through neighboring hamlets, whispers in taverns where pipes smoke curled like incense, questions posed over shared cider in barns redolent of hay and horse. Seen the Hayes girls summers past? Wandering healers round these parts? Odd lights or strangers? Most shook heads, faces weathered as bark, but Samuel Brennan, the burly Irishman with eyes green as emerald hills, leaned in close. Lights at old Westfield's stead, he murmured, brogue thick as peat. Not vagrants, steady glow, same window, 10 o'clock sharp, weeks on end, till October's chill snuff him. The Westfield farm, forsaken since 1821 when fever claimed its master, Jonathan, a speculator whose dreams rotted with him. Structures decayed, roofs sagging like a burdened back, outbuildings leaning as if in prayer for mercy. Hartwell ventured there October 30th, dawn's light filtering through leaves ablaze in autumn's fiery judgment. reds and golds like the flames of Gehenna. The path wound serpentine, hills cupping the sight like a chalice of secrets, invisible from roads traveled by honest folk. Isolation pressed in, trees whispering accusations in the breeze, undergrowth snagging boots like grasping hand from the grave. The main cabin loomed, logs hewn thick, windows glazed, a rarity evoking Babel's towers, ambition overreaching. Chimney stones stood sentinel, cold now, but Hartwell imagined smoke rising like sacrificial offerings. The door creaked ajar, hinges slick with fresh oil, no rust protest. Inside, the great room betrayed recent life. Floors swept bare, air laced with kerosene's acrid bite, furniture dusted as if awaiting guests. But the rear chamber, oh, the revelation struck like Paul's on Damascus Road. A sanctum profaned, central table, oak slab scarred and stained crimson, evoking altars of old where lambs met knives. Straps of cured leather bolted at precise points. Wrists, ankles, torso, throat, worn grooves testifying to struggles, flesh yielding to bondage. Walls hosted horrors, blades arrayed by size, gleaming under dust motes like stars in a fallen sky. Copper wands wired to a voltaic pile, jars of acid and metal, harnessing lightning as if stealing Zeus's thunder or God's wrath. Pinned above, diagrams assaulted the eye, female forms sketched with draftsman's precision, annotated in Latin and measures, lines mirroring Margaret's scars, a blueprint for desecration. Each cut plotted, depths calculated, as if mapping the soul's meridians. A journal bound in hide rested open, pages filled with chronicle. Day 1, subject imprimed. Vitality optimal, intellect acute, prime for trials. Incisions per schema, subject alert, response is cataloged. Day 15, voltaic assays initiated. Gradated currents to neural hubs. Heated probes yield peak data, 120 degrees optimal. Vocalizations pinpoint sensitivities. Day 32. Adaptation evident. Resistance wanes, subject aids positioning. Extends session viability. Hartwell recoiled, pages blurring through tears. Detachment colder than a grave, treating agony as datum. Yet familiarity nagged. The script's flourish, terminology's sophistication, anatomical mastery. Comparing to his own notes, correspondence from esteemed colleagues, a thunderbolt of truth descended. This was Elias Cunningham's hand. Harvard-trained luminary, Southeastern Ohio's medical paragon, researcher of neural maladies for a decade. Cunningham, with his Boston polish, imported instruments and lectures on progress, now unmasked as architect of this inferno. Had ambition corrupted him, turning healer into tormentor? Biblical parallels surged, Judas's betrayal for silver or Cain's mark, branding the guilty. Margaret's consent now reeked of manipulation, her trust exploited like forbidden fruit. The discovery shattered Hartwell. Cunningham, a man he'd admired, corresponded with, now a monster cloaked in white coat. What divine scales weighed such sins? Retribution loomed, a haunting legacy where science's light cast the longest shadows. Margaret's scars weren't mere wounds. They were indictments, symbols of redemption denied, justice deferred. As Hartwell fled the cabin, wind howling like banshees, he pondered, was this the price of unchecked curiosity, a spiritual chill echoing through generations? But the nightmare deepened. Cunningham's web extended further, entangling more than one soul in its threads. Whispers of other subjects, vanished girls from distant settlements, surfaced in Hartwell's mind. The journal hinted at prior trials, notations on enhanced protocols from previous iterations. Had Margaret been but one in a chain, a sacrificial lamb in a ritual of pseudo-divine inquiry? Hartwell burned the journal that night, flames licking pages like hell's tongues, but the knowledge seared his conscience. He confronted Cunningham privately. A tense meeting in Athens, lamplight revealing the doctor's face, lined not with remorse, but defiance. For advancement, Cunningham hissed, eyes gleaming like a zealot's. Pain births progress. History absolves the bold. Hartwell refused treatment, sealing records, but the moral weight crushed him. Margaret lingered in limbo, her mutterings fading, yet scars eternal, a living parable of sin's cost. Neighbors spoke of hauntings at Westfield, lights flickering anew, as if Cunningham's spirit, or divine vengeance, lingered. The case buried, but its chill persisted, a warning against playing God, where redemption came not easily, and justice whispered from the woods. As November's bite gripped 1823 Ohio, turning breath to frost and rivers to iron, Dr. Samuel Hartwell rode toward Athens with a burden heavier than sin. The road wound through skeletal forests, branches clawing at the sky like the fingers of the unrest dead, leaves crunching under hooves in a dirge for the innocent. In his saddlebag lay damning relics. Margaret's journal, pages warped by rain, yet screaming of seduction. Clinical notes from the Westfield abomination, inked in a hand that betrayed monstrous precision. Hartwell's mind churned with torment. How had a man of learning twisted knowledge into torment? Was this the serpent's fruit reborn, promising enlightenment through agony? Margaret's scars burned in his memory, geometric sigils of hubris, evoking the Tower of Babel's fall, where man's reach defied God's domain and invited ruin. Athens, the county seat, rose modest yet proud amid rolling hills. Brick edifices standing sentinel, smoke curling from chimneys like prayers unanswered. Here dwelt Dr. Elias Cunningham, 58 winters etched into his patrician features, Harvard's laurels crowning a reputation unassailable. His brick home on Main Street gleamed with prosperity, heavy drapes veiling secrets, a brass plaque proclaiming Drive E. Cunningham, M.D., Harvard Medical College, in letters bold as false prophecy. He had arrived in 1815, heralding advances against nervous disorders, tending governors and judges with a touch that inspired awe. Physicians from Cincinnati to Columbus sought his counsel, his words gospel in medical circles. Yet Hartwell now saw the facade for what it was, a sepulchre whitened, hiding rot within. Past visits to this house had filled Hartwell with admiration. Consultations amid shelves groaning under tomes from Europe, anatomical wonders preserved in glass. Hearts suspended in ether, brains mapped like forbidden territories. But on November 2nd, as he dismounted, reins trembling in gloved hands, dread coiled like a viper. The air smelled of wood smoke and impending storm, the doors knocker cold as a crypt stone. Cunningham received him in the private study, fire crackling in the hearth, yet failing to warm the chill that settled on Hartwell's soul. Specimens stared from jars, organs floating in murky fluid, eyes accusatory. Charts on walls depicted nerves in intricate webs, now evoking not healing, but the threads of a spider's trap. Hartwell laid the evidence upon the mahogany desk, polished to a mirror sheen reflecting distorted faces. Margaret's journal thumped softly, the Westfield notes fanned like cards in a devil's game. Cunningham's pale blue eyes, cold as glacial depths, scanned them without flicker. No outrage, no denial, only the detached gaze of a dissector pondering flesh. I wondered when the Westfield sanctuary would be breached, he murmured, leaning back in leather that creaked like strained bonds. I had hoped to conclude this series before seeking securer grounds. The admission struck Hartwell like lightning's bolt, casual, unrepentant. Current series? He rasped, voice cracking as autumn ice. Dear God, Cunningham, are there others? The elder physician drew a portfolio from his drawer, leather supple as flayed skin, revealing sketches that seared the retina. Bodies marked with the same profane geometries as Margaret's. Lines precise, angles unforgiving. Names inscribed below. Subject A, James Patterson, 24. Subject C, Sarah Mills, 19. Subject F, Thomas Burke, 31. Men and women, ages varied, all etched for science's altar. You cannot fathom the magnitude. Cunningham intoned, voice professorial, condescending as a false shepherd. Centuries shackled by ethics, timid barriers stifling progress. I shattered them. These contributions will illuminate treatments for generations, easing sufferings untold. Hartwell stared, horror blooming like blood from a fresh cut. These are souls, Cunningham, beings with kin, dreams, eternities stolen for your delusions. Subjects, corrected Cunningham sharply, eyes narrowing. Carefully chosen vessels for advancement. Their offerings noble. The manipulation of Margaret unfolded like a venomous bloom. Cunningham's method, nomadic benevolence through remote hamlets, dispensing aid while scouting. Youth vibrant, minds keen, ties fragile. Margaret exemplified perfection. He said, extracting her dossier, notes meticulous on her isolation, intellect, curiosity. Treating her father's ailment afforded entry. I lent texts, debated cases, lauded her acuity. She thirsted for more than Millfield's drudgery, grateful for intellectual communion. The grooming insidious, forged missives from Boston luminaries, fabricated accolades from institutions, a web of deceit painting him visionary persecuted by backward mores. Secrecy imperative, he'd whispered, lest provincial minds thwart enlightenment. Margaret, proud vessel for history's pages, assented, believing her pain birthed immortality in journals revered. Hartwell's gorge rose. This was no brute force, but psychological crucifixion, trust crucified on ambition's cross. And the others? Hartwell demanded, fist clenched white. Cunningham consulted a ledger, finger tracing like a reaper's scythe. Margaret, subject G, seventh in sequence. Prior yielded data, yet faltered in resilience. Most expired amid advanced protocols. Deaths spoken casually, as discarding spoiled specimens. No remorse, only clinical regret for incomplete datasets. Barry, Hartwell whispered, throat raw. Disposed in the vast wilderness, ravines deep, shafts abandoned. The forest claims its own. Remains serve no further utility. Rage ignited, righteous as Michael's sword. Hartwell rose, chair scraping like bones in a grave. Your atrocities end here. Evidence compels justice, from attorney general to governor. Cunningham's mask cracked, detachment yielding to menace. He stood, frame gaunt yet threatening, advancing to a cabinet of instruments gleaming wickedly. You presume much, frontier sawbones. My allies, judges, merchants, rely on my skill. Who credits your hysteria over a madwoman's ravings? Knife drawn, surgical, razor keen, he gripped it with familiarity born of countless incisions. Margaret's wanderings explain her marks, self-mutilation in lunacy. No proof endures. Hartwell backed toward the door, heart thundering. But foresight armored him. Duplicates hidden in Millfield, letters primed for delivery to Columbus authorities, editors should he vanish. I've safeguarded against silence, Hartwell declared, voice steadying with resolve. Harm me, and your ledger floods the light. Governor, prosecutors, presses. Your empire crumbles. Uncertainty flickered in Cunningham's eyes, calculation warring with fury. Bluff, he sneered, conviction hollow. Wager your soul on it. Hartwell countered. Climax erupted. Cunningham lunged, blade arcing like judgment deferred. Hartwell, War of 1812 surgeon, dodged on instincts honed in battlefield chaos. They grappled amid the study. Chairs toppled like felled idols. Instruments clattered. Scalpels skittering across floors stained with imagined blood. Books tumbled, pages fluttering as frantic doves. Cunningham, desperation fueling age, slashed wildly. Hartwell, fury lending strength, parried with forearm, pain lancing yet ignored the fray, brief, savage, grunts echoing, breath ragged, the hearth's fire witnessing. Cunningham slipped on scattered tomes, momentum betraying. The knife twisted in his grasp, plunging into his own chest with fateful precision. Blood bloomed dark on his waistcoat, eyes widening in shock, as if divine hand guided the reversal. Kane slain by his mark. He slumped across the desk, portfolio scattering sketches like fallen angels, life ebbing in gurgles. Hartwell staggered back, chest heaving, hands slick with another's blood, yet not murder, but retribution's echo. The room spun, specimens leering, charts mocking. Outside, wind howled approval or lament, rain lashing windows like tears from heaven. Cunningham's unsealed one horror, yet shadows lingered. 6 unmarked graves whispering from ravines. Margaret's fractured soul seeking redemption. Evidence dispatched. Authorities descended. Westfield scoured, though bodies elusive in wilderness's embrace. Cunningham's connections delayed full reckoning. Records sealed, whispers of accident in grief-stricken study. Yet Hartwell's copies pierced veils, magistrate trembling as truths emerged. Margaret, in catatonic vigil, never fully mended, scars eternal testament, mutterings fading to silence, a living parable of innocence profaned. The case haunted frontiers. 3 physicians, Hartwell first, then summoned specialists, recoiled, refusing prolonged care, souls scorched by proximity to evil. One fled Ohio, notes consigned to flames. Divine justice? Or human frailty exposed? Margaret's legacy, a chill underscoring ambition's peril, where knowledge without mercy invites damnation. In Ohio's woods, lights flicker still at forsaken steads, as if restless spirits guard against repetition. Warnings etched not in flesh, but eternity, but the ripples extended. Whispers of Cunningham's network, forged endorsements hinting accomplices in eastern halls, vanished like mist. Had greater conspiracies lurked, shielded by power? Margaret's father, Thomas, withered in grief, farm reclaimed by wilds. Settlements spoke in hushed tones of vanished youths, eyes averted from traveling healers. Medicine advanced, yet scarred. Ethics forged in this crucible, oaths strengthened against hubris. Reflect, in pursuing light, do we court darkness? Margaret's body, mapped in pain, mirrors humanity's flaws, guilt inscribed, redemption elusive. Her story, buried near 2 centuries, resurfaces as caution, play God, and face his reckoning. In the suffocating hush of that Athens study, November's chill seeping through cracked windows like the breath of Judgment Day, Dr. Samuel Hartwell beheld the end of a monster. Elias Cunningham slumped across his desk, the surgical knife, once wielder of profane incisions, now embedded in his own chest, a poetic reversal scripted by fate or divine hand. Blood pooled dark and viscous on mahogany, soaking sketches of scarred bodies like accusations from the grave. Cunningham's eyes, those pale orbs of clinical ice, glazed over without remorse. His final rasp a lament not for souls shattered, but for research interrupted. Hubris unrepentant to the last, echoing the serpent's defiance in Eden's fall. Hartwell stood frozen, pulse thundering in his ears, the metallic tang of blood mingling with hearth smoke. Righteous fury ebbed into a chasm of moral torment. Self-defense, yes, but revelation demanded exposure. Cunningham's ledger of horrors, 7 lives profaned in science's name. Yet truth's blade cut both ways. Full disclosure would drag Margaret through public scrutiny, her fractured mind paraded like a spectacle, scars bared to gawking eyes. The frontier's fragile trust in healers, already tenuous amid quacks and charlatans, might shatter, birthing fear that starved the needy of care. Biblical shadows loomed, the greater good, or silence as complicity. Like Abraham's withheld hand, or Pilate's wash, Hartwell chose the path of shadowed mercy. He staged the scene with trembling precision. Instruments scattered as if mid-procedure, Cunningham positioned in tragic accident, a solitary experimenter felled by his own zeal. Sheriff Robert Mason's inquiry proved perfunctory, deference to the Harvard luminary's stature, blinding scrutiny. Tragic mishap, the report decreed, sealed without probe. In those stolen hours, Hartwell purged the infernal traces. Flames devoured journals and sketches in his clinic's hearth, pages curling like damned souls. Clinical detachment reduced to ash, yet searing his conscience eternally. Instruments plunged into the Hocking River's depths, sinking into silt like forgotten sins. The voltaic pile dismantled, fragments hurled into county pits, vanishing amid refuse. Under midnight's veil, Hartwell enlisted two steadfast companions, men of Millfield soil, bound by unspoken loyalty, querying naught. They raised Westfield's laboratory, the restraint table, worn by struggles, hacked and consigned to purifying fire, smoke rising like incense to an unforgiving God. Blades buried in disparate plots, earth tamped firm. The chamber scoured, bloodstains bleached into oblivion, walls whispering no more of agony. But one testament endured, unerasable, Margaret Hayes herself. Her body, mapped in geometric stigmata, lines evoking Solomon's seals perverted, circles of infernal precision, a living indictment of hubris. Her psyche, fractured like shattered tabernacle, replayed torments in episodes that chilled the soul. Weeks post Cunningham's demise, in Hartwell's clinic, air heavy with lavender and despair, she'd stiffen, eyes vacant as prophets in trance, subject's response recorded, measurements precise, doctor pleased, sessions resume. Voice flat, devoid of humanity, as if Cunningham's ghost puppeteered her still. Hartwell probed with ear as tools, herbal drafts to soothe nerves frayed like torn scripture, soothing dialogue invoking Job's patience. Mesmerism gleaned from Philadelphia texts. Vain, all barriers impregnable, built by systematic desecration. Improvement crept gradual, incomplete, a dawn veiled in perpetual twilight. Episodes waned, her gaze occasionally anchoring on Hartwell's face, words emerging in her timbre. Pleas for sustenance, warmth against winter's bite. Yet the luminous intellect, that beacon luring Cunningham like moth to flame, dimmed forever, a light extinguished in pursuit of forbidden knowledge. Arrangements forged through Quaker networks in Pennsylvania, havens for minds unmoored, correspondence veiled to shield the unspeakable. Hartwell liquidated his Millfield practice, proceeds funneled into a trust, eternal provision, his penance manifest. He retreated to a modest farm, practicing sparingly, fees waived for the destitute, hands once stained, now instruments of quiet atonement. Thomas Hayes, Margaret's father, received only fragments, a forest-induced breakdown, necessitating specialized sanctuary. Truth withheld, perhaps merciful, the alternative, betrayal by revered physician, too abyssal for a grieving heart. Thomas faded in 1825, farm untended, guilt gnawing like Cain's mark. Deathbed whispers, per neighbor's vigil, apologies to Margaret for guardianship failed, soul departing unabsolved. The homestead reverted wild, reclaimed by state, resold in 1828 to oblivious settlers. Cabin demolished, fields replanted, traces effaced, yet earth remembering. Hartwell's pilgrimages to Margaret spanned 15 years, until his 1838 passing. Journeys dual-edged, solace in her calming presence, torment in reminders of delayed intervention. She recognized him faintly, serenity blooming briefly, yet the 3 months' abyss remained sealed. Trauma's prison, bars forged in leather and copper. Quakers chronicled a tranquil existence, aiding chores with gentle diligence, intellect flickering in bookish discourse or daily musings. No union, no intimacies, solitude her shroud, legacy of violation. Hartwell's posthumous papers unveiled the crucible, a valedictory epistle, quill heavy with regret. Silence, life's gravest decree, to spare further anguish. One soul preserved, yet 6 forsaken. Their weight accompanies me beyond the veil. Pray judgment weighs not concealment, but endeavors to preclude recurrence. His medical kit, attic entombed, swathed in linen, bore inscription, healing's tools, now memorials of prevention's failure. May discoverers grasp medicine's covenant, sacred, inviolable. The trio of physicians, Hartwell, Athens' Marcus Webb, Lancaster's Joseph Stirling, discerned abuse's architecture, yet recoiled from treatment. Not desertion, but acknowledgement. Conventional arts impotent against such metaphysical wounds, justice illusory in frontier's lawless weave. Hartwell's seclusion deepened. By 1830, practice abandoned, tools vended, life distilled to tillage and sparse mercy. Neighbors recalled a melancholic benevolence. Emergencies met with skill, eyes haunted by unspoken specters. The saga interred nigh 2 centuries, dossiers court sealed, confidants silent in death. Resurfacing in 1990's digitization, a cryptic Athens file, Hartwell's guarded missive on anomalous exigencies. Probes yielded shards, facts skeletal, victims' fates, 6 predecessors, swallowed by ravines, mine shafts, wilderness vast and indifferent. No bones unearthed, Cunningham's disposal meticulous. Margaret endured to 1847, 46 summers, expiring serenely amid Quaker care, recorded as natural decline post-prolonged malady, trauma, unchronicled. Interred in Philadelphia's modest plot, marker austere. Name, dates, echoing unmarked frontier graves. This chronicle unveils American medicine's nadir, frontier isolation birthing predators cloaked in authority, exploiting solitude for progress. It illuminates witnesses' agony, powerless against entrenched might, opting burial over feudal clamor. Most chilling, Margaret's singularity illusory. America's expanse harbored multitudes, vanished in remoteness, torments confided solely to perpetrators, perhaps mute observers weighing silence's calculus. Were greater webs woven? Hartwell's unsent epistle, vanished duplicates, hints of broader concealment, power shielding power. Cunningham's allies dissipated inquiries, perhaps complicity rippled eastward. The chill persists. Evil oft-garbed in trust's robes, oaths do no harm, perverted into veils for atrocity. Progress untethered from mercy invites retribution, divine or mortal. Reflect upon this parable. Ambition unchecked births monsters, silence compounds guilt. Margaret's scars, physical and ethereal, symbolize innocence's desecration, redemption deferred. 6 unnamed wander eternal shadows, justice denied. Yet perhaps an exposure now, their whispers heed, vigilance eternal, lest history's ghosts reclaim the living. What lingers in your spirit? Was full truth unearthed, or abysses deeper conceal more victims across forgotten frontiers? Ponder the healers who falter, the silenced who endure. Share below your reflections on this veiled atrocity. State your vantage, thoughts unsparing. If shadows of history compel you, subscribe for deeper descents into America's buried horrors. Together, unearth what light fears. Until next revelation.